in case you're wondering what it is short for. I'm one of the co-founders of Girls in Film. We're super happy to have you guys.
And it made me feel like this process, we kind of did the same thing when we were making a film, a team and I, for many years. We kind of just disappeared and we made this film for you. It's now been streaming all over the place, and we're coming to the end of the public screenings. It's now available on my website. I want you to take it with you. I want it to be your friend. I want it to be a companion. I want it to be your journal. I want it to be your reference point. I want it to be your family album.
You never really looked into our brown eyes. But you never averted your gaze either.
To kind of watch this film more than once. So we are aware that there's a lot to digest, there's a lot of feelings that the work brings up, and that is beautiful, and I'm going to hand over to you.
My name is Milisuthando, and I write and I talk a lot about the past, the present, and the future of South Africa and all the ways we come together socially and politically and all of that. And I think I was invited to discuss this film because I have a very personal connection to the story that Millie lived. In fact, the first time I watched this film, I was like, damn, this is what it's like to be white. Like, just everything is just so affirming, everything is so familiar, everything feels like it belongs to you. Like whenever you watch anything, it's like, this is my world recreated, from the furniture to the clothing to the settings and everything. One of the first questions that we discussed was, when did you first know you were Model C?
I think before we go into it, I think re-establishing the terminology would be quite nice.
Okay, cool.
So like, what is Model C? I think everybody knows, but obviously, formerly white schools, institutions that were not necessarily safe spaces for young black bodies going into them, but were where, I guess, they fought as a part of like building a new South Africa. I'm younger than like the kind of people in the interview and things like that, so by the time I got to like school, grade 1, how did I find out? I found out after a slightly traumatic incident at school where a boy had sort of wanted to test a theory. He wanted to know, he wanted to see, and he strangled me. And he wanted to see, and he really wanted to see. And I was like, what is he going to see? When my mom came and like was shouting at people, she was like, what do you mean, what do they want to see? Essentially, I think he wanted to see black people feel pain. So for me, I didn't find out that I'm Model C, I found out that I'm black. In the most apartheid way as a portrait, I mean like physical violence. So I think,
I think something so interesting about that memory of yours is like, I think the coupling of Model C with like racial trauma, like we kind of have already connected that meaning. And I think something interesting in the film is that she used imagery to show the children walking past those very like aggressive and mean crowds. Yeah, and it was interesting for me because I've only ever really seen that in relation to the United States and like desegregation in the 60s and all of that. I had never seen footage like that, and I wish Millie was here to talk to us about like her sourcing of her archival footage. I think that's the number one thing I would ask is, and so I think it's really interesting that your first memory is like, or your defining memory of this experience is one of like a really violent like racial clash. I like the way Milisuthando defined it in the film when she went from having no address to having an address, right? Like not having a place you can write down as yours and then suddenly like you exist on the map. And when did I first know I was Model C? But when I think about like my actual school experience, I'm so jealous of people who kind of came into like racial consciousness later in life. I cannot remember ever not thinking about myself as black, ever. I feel like whiteness is like an ongoing rejection. Like if I was to define it simply, I'd say it's just like a constant, you're not eating the right food, you're not dressed the right way, your hair is not the right way. And I think it was interesting to see in the film that it actually also expresses like a rejection of self. Like, it's not like they reject others and accept self, like by definition, it's just a rejection, like nothing's ever right. And so, yeah, I don't know, do we have a former model C's with us?
And so my first experience with the model sceners was like, I kind of, I think, understood what the going to school experience would be, but it was with my uncles at home. And it was just like these weird moments of, oh, and it was like this weird kind of like always this interrogation. And I didn't get it. So the weirdness for me followed me home, where I was living in a very black suburb. And so for me, it kind of felt like I was like a job, like I was on whiteness time. And then, so when it followed me home was when it got weird for me. When it felt like the overlap was, the timeline kind of got crazy.
What you spoke about now, I resonate with completely. The archive footage of the gymnastics fucked with my mind. Because I'm slightly older, I grew up in Kgothatso. So we had that gymnastics thing, and we had to do the whole thing of trying to dance to Mangobe. It was just like such a mess. But the cognitive dissonance of going to Kwali Mitchell Primary, which was a multiracial primary school in Mabato High, in apartheid South Africa, which was a Bantustans, and then supposedly we were gonna go to another country whenever we went to visit my grandmother. And there, for some reason, I drank Milo when everybody else drank tea, which was like, why am I different to my cousins? But when I get to primary school, Joanne is there, and Joanne's got blue eyes, blonde hair. It was all just like, yeah, it's a really, yeah, the cognitive dissonance and the mind fucked upness of it all is really interesting. So just thought to share that.
Is this a situation where people need to take responsibility, make amends? And who would those people be? What do you think? And I thought about that father who said, oh, that got me, when he said, the children are going to show us adults how to exist together. And I thought, we were just trying to be children. Like, we were just trying to be children. How were we supposed to know? So I don't know, where have you put your parents and the choices they made?
I was like, no, not the children of the future. Not again, either way. Not again. Not again. And I think like the most poignant thing about the film and like that moment is the line where she says the residual dilemma is the hurt. And I really think that that's the thing where, how do I even begin to place it? Like, do we blame them? No, I don't know how. Do we say they were doing the best they could? I guess. But at the same time, I think the biggest thing for me, processing this as a grown up, is hindsight is 2020, and I think that it just wasn't right. Like, the way it was handled was not the best.
The biggest thing for me was coming to an understanding that our parents were experiencing all of this for the very first time. Because I've come to an understanding with my parents and my grandparents as well, who had an even harder time even just naming what was happening to them and what was going on. Living in that uncertainty of not knowing what could come from it, but just continuing trying to depend on that hope.
My first intimate, close, most cherished relationships were with white girls. And once we got to a certain age, like in our late teens, where we now understood that we were very different races, it made me, I will own, it made me see my relationships with them as very disposable. I thought I was disposable to them, and I put them in a place where I'm ready anytime to walk away because you're over there and I'm over here and you don't get it. And the most generous thing I want to say about that marriage conversation is I think it's fantastic for both of them that they were able to talk through those moments. I now look back on my relationships now and I think we loved each other, we were friends, we were there for each other. My white friends did so much for me, but it was all tempered through, but you're racist and so are your parents, right? And I will own that I was unfair to them and in those relationships in those ways, and I wish we would have had the space. I look back now and I think how irresponsible of our schools not to create the space. And so I think it's beautiful that like they were actually even able to make this film, and I kind of commend Marion for speaking so honestly, but I don't know. What do we think of those two friendship conversations?
And that Marion part, every time I'm like, oh, here we go again. And I think the reason we respond that way is because either internally or externally, that has happened to us, those of us who are in relationship with white people. And you've either had to swallow it, or you've had a bust up about it. So one of the times that I watched it, I took my white bestie, and that time when the Marion thing happened, I'm watching her like, people there the whole time. And it allowed us to talk about our relationship, especially because of that line where she says there's something to preserve here. And I think it's super important because we can blame our history and the things that have made it so our relationships are based on the survival instead of the want. But there is something to preserve if we want to be here and to be in a country that we even sort of like.
So it's quite interesting that in 30 years after democracy, we're still going through these sort of traumas, and we're still having to reflect on it and speak about it and deal with it. But the point I was trying to make is that, I think there's a difference between being wrong and being considered wrong, and I think that creates that separation. And I understand as a child, it's hard to, when you're going through those issues, it's hard to make that separation. That no, it's not that I was wrong; it's that these people consider this wrong.
Like I said, there was no one there to like guide or mediate or hold any of that energy. We just kind of, but we were all kids, and I agree with you to an extent there about compassion. Milisuthando's conversation with her grandmother, when her grandmother said that racial mixing ruined the Transkei. I think it's always so interesting. I always make note of how often it is that the quote-unquote oppressed, sometimes when we, the ones who are on this side, arguing for what we believe, can mirror and sound exactly like the bad guys or the other guys on the other side. And I did not have the experience of growing up in a Bantustans, so I don't know if the grandmother was expressing a common viewpoint, but that was really surprising to me. There was something interesting about the way she said that, about race mixing, ruining Xhosaness and ruining the Transkei. I mean, was that a normal sort of like, was that part of the tension that other people felt in socializing across racial lines?
I think definitely, like, does racial mixing create something? Does it create attention, or does it create a shock? Does it create some type of a value in the South African zeitgeist and the experience in post-apartheid South Africa? 100%.
Or upset our black lives.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's polarizing in general. It's polarizing because of who we are, where we're at.
I think what Umakulu meant is not race in the way that we mean race. She means race in the way that it was then, that uyoqopoka, and uqopoka meant the translation in Xhosa would be a piercing of your soul. What happened is that African spiritual beliefs fell to the wayside. Okay. So that's what she means, that there was, it's not leaving ubuXhosa as in the tribal, it's leaving ubuXhosa the ancestral. Yeah.
This there's something so interesting in what you're saying, because you unpacked something that will go over so many people's heads, which is like, as part that she mentions, the indoctrination, the ideology, the notion of the separatist Bantustan and the happiness in that independence.
That mixing is what disempowered our spirituality. And when our spirituality was also the basis of what formed the struggle. In the same way that Japan closed its borders, we're going to develop ourselves by ourselves, and then we'll face. But then if you bring people inside where we're developing by ourselves.
It's this unspoken failure for me to come back having been influenced by that environment in any way. And my mom used to say to me all the time, I'm not Steph's mom and you're not Steph. And I understood her point. But yeah, that's what Makuli's words reminded me of.
Why am I triggered by not just the film, but just, living with also white people every day and the little things that they do? Is it because of the ancestor, like what happened to my ancestors? Maybe I'm feeling it. I don't know, but I am triggered. Like some of my relationships with white people, I find them hard to navigate sometimes. And I don't know why, because I don't have the trauma that my granny has.
What our parents went through is something we will never understand. And what we are going through is something they will never understand. My mom often says it to me all the time. She's like, it is harder, she feels it is harder to be young now than it was for them under apartheid. The why, I don't want to take up too much time because I know there's other people who want to speak, but something tells me that as this conversation evolves, we might be able to kind of piece together something. I don't even get angry that often. Why is my anger such a intense topic that needs to be discussed all the time? But I think that's related to why there's a struggle to even connect to our own anger. It weirds everyone out so much, and I can't for the life of me figure out why. But I think you're asking the right question, but if you turn that question inwards, and it might take a while, and you might even find you're angry at people you don't want to be angry at, but you'll move through it.
I think that there's a thing where you're like what she said, you're told you shouldn't have a problem. I'm told I wasn't there, it didn't happen to you. I think who does that confusion protect? Right? Like who wins when we don't feel valid in our lived experience?
In my opinion, the best way to navigate this whole thing is to understand that there's a lot of unlearning and teaching to be done. Because there's a part where quite tear-dropping, where the boy says that he wishes for a new South Africa, the lawyer boy, who says he would love to be a lawyer because he loves the way they walk in court. And it made me kind of sad because so many years later we are post-apartheid, but so much trauma has been built again.
Colonization. So the fact that you're angry, don't doubt yourself. You have every right to be angry. And there's this strange kumbaya-ness about Africans that the world needs. And I think we just fight.
I wasted a lot, not wasted, but I silenced and ignored myself for a long time because I kept saying, well, that's my parent, they went through and now I'm fine. Something that was so empowering for me was learning the difference between big T trauma and small T trauma. And big T trauma is guns, bombs, violence, police, dogs, the stuff we can point at and say that was really bad. And small T trauma is, I can't say your name, so I'm not going to say it. You being, for me, realizing as a black child in those schools, you can't just be a quirky, kind of bubbly, kind of naughty, cheeky child. There's only one way for a black child to be, and that is bloody grateful to be here, getting straight A's. If you're a little forward or a little edgy or like me, ADHD, see, you're not supposed to be here.
What I wanted to share on actually was just to touch a bit on the three things that have been discussed, and I'll start on why you're angry, right? And just adding on what you say. Through the conversations we have with our parents, through the films we watch, like Milisuthando, like Sarafina, You know, like through the music we listen to. If you listen to Kwaito and listen to all of this music, there's this inherited memory that we sort of carry from that, and we move on with it. But at the same time, Steve Biko once said, we need to truly understand what it is that we are dealing with before we even think of coming up with a remedy.
My name is Bongela. Happy to see this documentary, and to hear everybody's opinions on everything. I think all I took from today was decentering whiteness. Anyway, as a black person, we'll start with having conversations about blackness. I think my experience growing up was very filled with rejection, but I think the ones that hurt the most were coming from black folk because of the decisions my mother made. But yeah, I do feel that maybe we center whiteness because we're afraid of the demons that come out when we try to speak to each other.
Yeah. Oh, the way that black girls at my school used to wait to catch each other out with English mistakes. When you pronounce something wrong, the first person to embarrass you is that person. That's for another day.
I just want to say thank you so much for everybody for coming. Thank you so much. This is our last event for the year. Girls in Film will be back next year. And I think the salon-style conversation thing works. And don't forget, the movie is going on to the Criterion Collection. It will also be on Milisuthando's website. So if you have friends that still need to see it, please do share. Thank you.
Thank you.